The story has been prepared by the residents concerned and not experts. It has therefore no scientific pretensions. They have, however, a great and irrefutable contrast: the happy memories of how their houses were and the sad evidence of how they are today. It is also a heartfelt and bitter complaint against the ways in which the Spanish government is managing its environmental problems along its coastline, and against the retroactive application of the unfair and unjust Coastal Act. Finally, it is a defence of their individual liberties and private property. Denia is a city known throughout Europe for the quality of its climate and coastline, bathed by the tranquil Mediterranean Sea. Thousands of European tourists sunbathe and swim every year on its clean and manicured beaches. Or at least that is the image that the tourist industry would have us believe. This heavenly appearance, however, hides a much harsher reality, because the beaches of Denia are suffering, and have been suffering for decades, a very important environmental degradation, due mainly to a string of senseless actions by Spanish authorities, who are, paradoxically, responsible for their care and maintenance. Around 100 years ago, the beaches of Denia were continuously growing, leading to silting in its natural harbour. With the increase in port traffic, and to eliminate this problem in 1936, it was decided to close the harbour jetties. This ambitious and radical change saw a shift in the direction that ocean currents took, and resulted in the immediate regression of nearby beaches, namely Caguerita and Marines. Regretfully, this regression continues today. Spain has the second highest number of reservoirs per capita in the world, and, in addition to storing fresh water and producing electricity, they have a serious unintended consequence. By retaining sediment on the reservoir bed, the flow of these vital sediments to the beach are curbed. The river Girona was the principal supply of aggregates to the shores, but in 1945 construction works for the Isbert Dam were completed. From this date, the first consequence was the loss of all the sediments flowing from the upper reaches of the river into the sea. The second was the loss of floodwaters carrying important aggregate down to the beach. In short, the balance between input from the river and coastal erosion was tipped in favour of the latter. Quarry stone has proliferated on the bed of River Girona for many, many years. Recently, however, the Regional Water Authority, the Júcar Hidrográfica Confederación, has granted commercial permits for gravel and stone extraction, thus preventing this important commodity reaching the sea. Between 1955 and 1973, a cement plant was operating in Denia, and with administrative agreement the raw materials were dredged from the continental shelf off our coasts, and sand was removed from the dunes of Devizes Beach by trucks. This caused many complaints from neighbours who looked on in disbelief as the dunes disappeared and the coastline regressed, a regression that continues today. Traditionally, and with the consent of the authorities, large amounts of gravel were extracted from the Almadrava, destined for the construction industry. In 1973, the state administration granted a license for gravel extraction for the construction of a factory in El Vergel. The extraction stretched over many months, far exceeding the concession from the Alicante Coastal Department. Once again, this caused numerous complaints from individuals and from the neighbouring municipalities. From that moment, the degradation of the Almadrava beach had begun, until its original form totally disappeared. After decades of attempts by the City Council to halt the regression by dredging and building breakwaters, in 1988 the regeneration of Las Marinas Beach was started by a dredging of monumental proportions. The beaches close to Denia were completely regenerated, but only up to kilometre 5, and by not completing the regeneration of the whole of the coastline, there was an immediate increase in regression of the Estaño, Almadrava and Devizes beaches. In 1994, under the Coastal Act of 1988, the state initiated a process of demarcation that affected, in varying degrees, all the first-line houses on these abandoned beaches. About 40 or 50 houses would become state property, and many other owners lost part of their property, all without compensation. In 1996, in an attempt to save face, the Spanish government introduced a regeneration project for these beaches, which did not actually start until 2005. During the intervening time, the beaches had suffered substantial and significant damage, rendering the project, from a functional point of view, totally useless. The project was trying to stabilize an area that had lost, since 1947, some 12 million cubic meters of aggregates. In the early stages, it was thought that by replenishing the area with 3.8 million cubic meters, the problem would be solved, but it was soon clear that this would not be the case. The project was abandoned in favor of 900,000 cubic meters of sand and the construction of 3 breakwaters. Finally, in 2004, after suffering other significant reductions, improvised regeneration works commenced. Some 5,000 cubic meters of gravel were taken from Devizes to the Almadrava beach, and sand used to fill between the stones, albeit not marine sand. The Estaño beach and the last part of Devizes beach remained virtually as they were, and the Almadrava beach not much better. That is, the Estaño beach was provided with 0% of its requirement, and the Almadrava beach at Els Poblets received only 2.57% of the aggregate deemed necessary in the first project. Between the breakwaters is uncalculated, but the last stretch of Devizes Beach also received 0% of the quantity required. As a result, unregenerated sections caused damage to homes during the lightest of storms. Although the authorities promised to finish the work on the Almadrava beach with gravel from the river Girona, the reality is that gravel from the riverbed had been transported to beaches in Denia and Javia, creating a major environmental disaster and violating, from our point of view, several directives given in white papers on water and some articles of the Coastal Act itself, which prevent the extraction of aggregate from sedimentary units such as ours. The Spanish state has abandoned these beaches to their own devices, coining the term strategic withdrawal, which basically means doing nothing. Moreover, any works undertaken have been limited to patching and makeovers, which do not start to solve the problems that the state have created. The conduct of the competent environmentalists is reprehensible, and despite our complaints, they have done nothing to prevent the regression of our beach, even when they had the opportunity to do so in 1988. There are no plans to improve the situation in the immediate future, despite their own laws and directives requiring them to act. There is a great interest by the state, however, to expropriate our legal dwellings for free. Since 1994, a demarcation project exists in our area, to be carried out in the next 12 months if the European Parliament does not prevent it. Are our hopes and our children's future in jeopardy?